Hi everyone, I'm Jehanya from SNS Academy. In the last video, I have taught about the different parts of the flower, including the reproductive parts of the flower. In this video, we are going to see about how actually the pollination takes place and the fertilization takes place. So when you take the flowering plants mostly, they reproduce by production of seeds. So what is the process for production of seeds? So let us see in detail about how the seeds are produced. So like in the last video we have seen the reproductive parts of the flower. So the male reproductive part of the flower is called as the stamen. It consists of the filament and the anther. It consists of the filament. This stick-like thing is called as the filament and the anther. So the anther only will contain the pollen grains, which contains the male gamete. So similarly, when you take the female part of the flower is nothing but the carpel. So carpel at the base of the flower, inside of the flower, it has got the ovary. The white color thing, you call it as the ovary. The white color thing is the ovary. And it got a slender tube-like structure, a long tube-like structure called as the style. And at the end of the style, you have a sticky region. This is the sticky region called as the stigma. So here what happens is, first the pollination has to take place. So pollination is nothing but the transfer of pollen grains. So in another flower you can see the pollen grains, that is here. If you take, see there are yes. So here we have some yellow color parts. So when something is coming and touching here, we will have that yellow color in our hand. So that is the pollen grains. They are very sticky in nature. So pollen grains must be transferred from the anther to that of the to the ovaries. It has to be reaching the female gamete which is present within the ovules. So what happens is the pollen from the flower has to be transferred into the ovary. So how actually it happens? It happens by means of pollinators. Pollinators are nothing but the agents that help in the transfer of the pollen grains from the anther of the flower to the stigma of the flower. So there are many types of pollinators, living pollinators and non-living pollinators. For example, bees, birds, butterflies, animals are all living pollinators. Now, it depends upon the type of flower. The pollinators will be coming to the flower depending upon the flower. For example, if you take bees, bees are more attracted by purple color flowers and blue color flowers. So bees pollinate those kinds of flowers. When you take up the flies are attracted by dark red color or brownish color flowers, which looks like have the smell of a rotten meat, or looks like that of the meat. So they are getting attracted towards that. And when you take the butterflies are attracted by flat flowers, so that they can very open flowers where they can use their proboscis to suck the nectar from the flower. Similarly, when you take moths are attracted by very light color, that is white color or very light color flowers. So they pollinate those kinds of flowers. And when you take the bats are more attracted to the flowers which has a very good fragrance and the smell of a fruity odor, and also the plants which bloom at night. And similarly, when you take up the birds usually have beaks, so they prefer tube-like structured flowers. So from the flowers, what happened? The yellow color like pollen grains, these are the, see, I'm touching it. When I touch it, there will be, yes, in this flower you can see. So when I am taking this in my hand, you can see that yellow color one. So that is the pollen grain. So here the pollen grains, you can see a powdery thing if you touch the flowers. So that are nothing but the pollen grains. So what happens? The pollen from the anther, the pollens are actually produced in the anther, and the pollen contains the male gamete. That is, male gamete is nothing but the male reproductive cell. So from here, when the pollinators come and sit over this anthers, what will happen? They collect the pollens from there. And then what happens? When they reach the stigma of the flower, it is quite sticky. So what will happen when the insects or the birds or whatever it is, whichever the pollinators are, they deposit those, that is by natural phenomena, they get deposited on the stigma of the flower. So from the stigma, what happens? The pollen grains enters into the style, into the style, which is a long tube. The other, so when you take it, yeah, you can see the inside like a tube-like structure. So here, what will happen in the upper part also? It's actually a sticky tube-like structure. Okay, so the pollen grains will enter into this tube, and it will travel through a long tube-like structure, which is the style, and it enters into the. So now the pollen grains will enter into this. It will come through this style and enter into the ovary, where ovules are present. Ovules are present inside the ovary. So when you cut open the ovary, yes. So when you cut open the ovary, you can see small ball-like structures inside. So it will reach the female gamete. And the fusion of the transfer of the pollen grains can be from the same flower to the carpel of the same flower. So it is called as the self-pollination. It may be within the flower of the same plant. From one flower of the plant to another flower of the same plant, that is called as a self-pollination. Or it may happen between the flower, it may be the pollen from one flower is transferred to another flower of a different plant of the same type. So that you call it as a cross-pollination. So now once the pollination has occurred, the pollen will reach into the ovules. There the fusion of the male and the female gamete will take place. That you call it as a fertilization. Once the fertilization is done, what happens? The sepal will cover the flower and the petals will fall down after some days. So what will happen is the fruit will be developing. The ovary will be developing into the fruit, and the ovules will be developing into the seeds. So until the fruit is ripened, the seeds are being protected inside the fruit. So when the fruit is ripened and it falls down, the seed, when it is rotten and it is falling down, the seeds will be exposed to the soil and it will grow as a new young offspring, a new baby plant. This is how the life cycle of the plant is completed. It begins with the plant, it produces the flowers, it produces the fruits and the seeds, when they are reaching the soil and they are into the correct temperature and everything, they start germinating and they produce the plants. So this is how the life cycle goes on. This is about the reproduction of the plants. Thank you.